this. Yo guys, what is up? Max on our first Descendant video, and today we're going over my guide for Ultimate Sharen. Now, Sharen has been a character that I've basically just relegated to mainly outpost farming, but with her new ultimate form, the rework that she's gotten, and also her new transcendent modules, she is now a very impressive Descendant. And today we're going to be covering a few builds for her, revolving not only around her new transcendent modules, but also her like reworked ones. I hope you guys enjoy the video and the full breakdown. Let's get right into it. So real quick, let's just talk about some of the big changes that they've done to Sharen, because they buffed the daylights out of her. So to start, cutoff beam used to be about 800 modifier. This is now 1,364. So her one just hits way harder than it did. It was already a really hard hitting ability, and its low cooldown means that you've got a massive damage ability on like a 1 second cooldown. They changed her camouflage, so now you get more movement speed while you're camouflaged. But the big thing here is ambush gives you flat skill crit and firearm crit. This is added to your base values, meaning, for example, Sharen has 20% critical hit rate normally, and if she's in ambush, she gets 22 plus that. So now her new floor for crit is 42%. They also just buffed the Blue Beetle. So now this weapon is God tier with Sharen, because when we use a fusion skill, which is like Sharen's main abilities, we're going to be getting a 115% increased skill critical hit rate. So just off of that, we are getting 2.15 times 42 for 90% critical hit rate just off the rip. Just holding this weapon, not even before we add critical hit mods on her, which is just kind of disgusting. And then the other changes that they did to her is they changed the third ability. This used to not deal any damage. It now does damage. It still has its stun, so it's still utility, but it also does a bunch of damage. And then they also changed her fourth ability to give it a little bit more damage. And her passive, as far as I'm aware, is still the same. So now let's talk about her first build, which is going to be her area suppression build. She has two really awesome transcendent modules that are both good. I personally prefer area suppression, but ambush is really powerful and awesome. We'll talk about that next. But area suppression allows our fourth ability to become a Nova of swords. These deal reduced damage when you add the mod, but they solve kind of the biggest issue with the fourth ability, which was cooldown. Every time that you crit with this, you're going to get 1 second back of cooldown. Just off the rip, we're going to try to have this infinitely up. So we're going to want a bunch of cooldown and a bunch of crit rate so that we can just spam this kind of infinitely. And once again, we're going to be trying to get this ambushed up so that ambush, whenever we're proccing this, is going to give us a 100% damage increase. So this is getting doubled its damage. And this is also going to give us more crit rate. So it's easier to proc or reproc this. And you can kind of get a really good flow between active camouflage and area suppression, where they're kind of like feeding into one another. So let's talk about our mods that we're going to go for. So first off, we do want survivability, even though we can go invisible. Sharen can be pretty squishy, so we're just going to start off by throwing an HP mod on her. Next up, we want, because this is a low modifier thing, 184, we're going to both want modifier and power. I am going to be going for focus on fusion and focus on electricity. These are going to give us more power and more modifier, which we care about deeply. The next thing that we need is cooldown. So cooldown, we're just inherently need to get this to below 10 seconds. So we're going to put on nimble and MP. And even if we get this below 10 seconds, which we will, this is now a 3.7 second cooldown. We want this as low as possible so that we can be in active camouflage as much. So right off the rip, we're at 3.7 second cooldowns on both of these. So they're going to be kind of syncing up and doing a bunch of damage. Next, we want to get some even more damage where we're going to get dangerous ambush. This is a god tier mod on Sharen. When we're landing a skill attack while the enemy is not targeting you, skill power plus 25%. We are not going for a like non-crit build on her. Obviously, on non-crit builds, one of the strategies that we use is we use power increase. Power increase gives us a source of like skill power that's non-specific, and we like don't really care about that whole like synergy on like crit builds because we're not building multiple different mods with multiple different sources. But with focus on electric, we're going to get electric skill power, and then we're getting our source of like non-specific skill power from dangerous ambush. So we've got 2 buckets of damage, so that's going to help us out deal even more damage. We want to make sure she's hitting as hard as possible. Now, for crit mods, because we have to build into crit, we are going to be using front lines, which is going to give us crit damage and skill crit rate. And we're also going to be using our concentration priority for skill concentration for even more crit damage. Now, these last kind of few mods these last 2 mods are a bit up to you, and I'll break down why I'm using what I'm using. So the real interesting thing is we're actually at crit cap without a crit chance mod if we are in ambush. Remember, in ambush, we get that like flat, so our flat is 42. We have 115% crit chance plus the 27 from front lines with our weapon and front lines, which gives us to 142 like crit chance. So that's 2.42 times our 42 base, which just puts us over crit cap, which means that anytime that we are going to be in active camouflage, we are guaranteed crits with the 4th ability. And so originally I wasn't going to build another crit mod at all, because we can get away without a 3rd crit mod here or even a 4th crit mod and be just fine. However, I think I've kind of changed my mind. And even though, like, you know, it's not like we can get some extra damage. So, like, if we cast our ability right now, we are going to be getting 48% crit rate, which if we're casting outside of our ambush is going to feel pretty bad. Obviously, when we cast in ambush, we're getting 100% crit rate. That doesn't display in your like character effect, but I've decided that we're going to go for these last things to go in emergency measures. That brings us up to when we do our abilities. Now we're at 61% critical hit rate. So we're, you know, when we're sending up 20 daggers, 61%, we're most likely getting, like, if we hit some of these, we're getting the full cooldown refunded. And we could technically go for, like, another crit module and go for, like, skill insight. I kind of opted out of that because I want to just spam this infinitely. I don't want to ever stop clicking our skill buttons, like, ever on this build. I don't want to use anything else besides the 4th ability. I ended up going for maximized conservation so that we can use it more often. This skill cost allows us to spam this. And I'll show you what kind of like our crit values are looking like right now with this setup. So we go invis and we're hitting for like 1.3 million per knife, which is disgusting. And all of those knives shotgun. And as you can see, like, we're dotting for like 587,000. Like, we've got more dot damage than like a Freyna, which is kind of crazy. But that's the setup that I went with because I really wanted to just be able to click this non-stop and never run out of mana. And so that's what I went with. But if you wanted to go for the extra crit chance, you definitely could. Now, our next build has to do with the new ambush mod. Now, this mod is sick. One thing that it does is it changes your 3rd ability to a massive damage modifier. This goes from like 280 to like 1,000 damage. So this is my preferred ability to use in her like ambush state. I just like spamming this with some radius. But the really cool thing about the ambush mod, 2 things. 1, if we kill an enemy while we're invis, we just recloak automatically. And 2, it has this kind of hidden stat here that gives us 30% cooldown while we're invis. And so I was originally thinking, you know, we would have to go for like some duration and stuff like that. But this gives us so much cooldown that we're able to just go full cooldown. And even if we don't kill an enemy with this, we're going to have enough cooldown that all of our abilities are going to be constantly up and we can just get right back into ambush. So I built this actually without any duration. We still have like 4 seconds to kill an enemy, but it's only on like a 4.9 second cooldown, and we're proccing that cooldown while we're in it anyways. So like the cooldown is actually really fast. And then the only change that we're actually making to the build is because we're going to be in ambush basically all the time, once again, remember when I said that we didn't need emergency measures to reach crit cap? With ambush, we can actually go for skill range here. So now we get range to spam our third and our one, and we don't need that extra crit chance mod to get more, to get full crit chance. So like, just to show you this real quick, let's turn it off so you can see the recloak. That's a 5.7 million hit on Sharen. The ambush mod is crazy. It is so much damage, and we have a guaranteed crit on every single attack. And you know, it's just a nuke. I can't decide which one I like more between the like ambush setup and the knives out setup. I think the knives out is like cooler and flashier, but the ambush just hits way harder, which is really fun. And our last little setup is for cutting force. Now, I'm going to be honest, Sharen has a lot of really good modules. I might even have to make like a second video to go over like gun Sharen with battlesuit melting rounds and overcharged edge. But because they just buffed all of the damage of her abilities, I really did want to focus on like ability damage stuff for this video. But Release cutting force used to cut down the modifier of her one to like abysmally low values. It used to be about a 200% modifier. It's now a 645% modifier. But once again, we get guaranteed crits on it. So now this hits way harder. It hits almost as hard as like the original slice before she got buffed. And it hits in an area. I don't like this as much as like the other two builds, but basically we can go invis, cast our one with a little bit of range, and we just one-shot packs with it. It's very, very cool. It's basically the exact same build as on Ambushed. The only thing that you could change if you wanted to is I don't think it's like as resource intensive to use the one. It's got lower like MP costs, and so you could swap Maximize Conservation for another crit mod there if you wanted to. But just for the like sake of saving some catalyst, I just ran the same thing. For weapons with Sharen, she's got a few cool choices. I think the Blue Beetle is just simply the best weapon. You kind of never want to not be holding this on her just because the amount of crit chance that it gives now. It's insane and definitely her best choice. But, you know, there's some other cool weapons. The Thunder Cage works well with her. And obviously, she has some big synergy with sniper rifles. This is the Afterglow build that I like using with her just to hit bosses really, really hard with her ambush and overcharged edge. For her reactor, the reactor that I'm using is Electric Fusion with skill crit damage and cooldown. I think cooldown is like the greatest thing you can get on a reactor for her because she loves spamming her abilities, and cooldown really, really helps with that. The more sources of cooldown we can get, the better. I think crit damage is also like the second best stat, to be honest, because we've basically got max crit chance anyways. So getting more crit damage to pump her damage up and really make her that single target character, I think is great. So I feel like I have a pretty perfect reactor. You do want a scout rifle mounting so that you can hold the Blue Beetle while running around with her. For her external components, I just kind of go for survivability, to be honest with you, just because at the end of the day, she's already doing so much damage. Her kind of only weakness is that she is a little bit squishier. She has to get close. So I run my like Annihilation set setup, and then I use two-piece Invader set for some extra HP. These roll massive amounts of HP on them to get some extra survivability out of her. So the time that we're not invisible, we're not immediately dying. I do want to mention bossing on Sharen real quick. I personally do not have the inversion reinforcement level to like fully build out her bossing setup. And what I mean by that is when you're spamming your fourth nonstop on a boss, I was just running out of mana. Sometimes like I wouldn't get the kill before I ran out of mana. She could do a ton of burst damage, but she also uses a bunch of mana. So I was using Maximize Conservation for that. But the better option for bossing is obviously emergency measures. But even with like a bunch of like MP regen stuff, I was just running out of mana before I could get some kills. It's probably showing on screen right now. But the big thing that they've added this season is some really powerful inversion reinforcement buffs. I am slacking on my levels, but if we unlock heightened sensory cells when an enemy is nearby, we get a bunch of MP back every second. We could lose Maximize Conservation and then go for 4 crit mods, and then we would be able to just like delete everything with her. There's also Quantum Domain, which is like, this doesn't have a stack decay. It doesn't go away. You just, every time you click your ability, you just get more and more skill power. And Quantum Domain and Heightened Sensory Cells would give us the mana sustain to just delete bosses without needing maximized conservation. So I just kind of wanted to point that out, that inversion reinforcement buffs are really powerful. They would allow us to lose this mod in favor of 4 crit mods. But at the time of recording this, I just didn't have that done. But for bossing specifically with area suppression, you do want to go for crit modules. I know I've said that you get capped crit chance while you're in ambush, but when you're spamming this as fast as you possibly can on a boss, you're doing a bunch of hits, well, about 3 seconds of hits and attacks where you're not in ambush, because this is going to be on cooldown. And so you want as much crit chance as possible, not only to deal as much damage, but also to make sure that you're refunding area suppression back as fast as possible. And so that is something that I need to tweak about my setup, is getting that 4th crit mod on, but I just couldn't really do it because I don't have the mana sustain without conservation. Yeah. Guys, that is going to do it for the video. I hope you enjoyed. I will catch y'all in the next one. I plan to have a updated Vyesa build very soon. Vyesa is absolutely insane right now. So we'll have that up hopefully next, along with a Voltia build. Just trying to get that Voltia to 4 out of 4 before I make a super hard judgment on it. But you guys, I'll catch you on the next one. Take care. Peace.